Skip to content chat history, you said. Can you create HFY sci-fi story outlines for me in a third-person style? I'll only provide the title, and the story should be completed in 5 parts. It should be interesting. Every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content, ChatGPT said. Absolutely. I'd love to create a human-first yet HFY sci-fi story outline for you. You just need to provide the title. I'll make sure the story is engaging and keeps the audience hooked through all 5 parts. Could you please provide the title for your story? You said EP3, she mocked the Earthborn human until she learned his rank? ChatGPT said. Great title. Here's a 5-part HFY sci-fi story outline based on EP3. She mocked the Earthborn human till she learned his rank. The story will be structured with engaging twists and character development, and will highlight the strength and resilience of humanity. Part 1. The Conquerors. Mockery summary. In the distant future, humanity is part of a galactic alliance, but it has a reputation of being the new kids on the block. With few allies and even fewer respected figures, Lyra, a fierce and ambitious warrior from the alien species known as the Vrail, views Earthborn humans with disdain. She has heard stories of the fragile, underdeveloped human race, and considers them a nuisance in galactic affairs. While at a prestigious interspecies gathering of elite military figures from across the galaxy, Lyra encounters Commander Marcus Vale, a human officer, but barely acknowledges his presence. She mocks his origins, calling him an Earthborn and trivializing his species' contributions to galactic peace. Marcus, a quiet but sharp individual, takes the insults with poise but remains largely unnoticed in the grand scheme of things. Cliffhanger. The atmosphere grows tense as Lyra, confidently and loudly, challenges Marcus's knowledge of tactics and strategy. To everyone's shock, Marcus accepts her challenge to a strategic simulation game, setting the stage for an unexpected turn. Part 2. The Unexpected. Challenge summary. The challenge between Lyra and Marcus is set to begin. A simulated battlefield, meant to test strategy, resourcefulness, and quick decision-making. Lyra believes the Earthborn commander will fail miserably after all. How could someone from a backwater planet possibly outsmart a seasoned warrior like her? The game begins, and Lyra wastes no time in using aggressive tactics, exploiting her species' superior technology and reflexes. Marcus, on the other hand, moves carefully, relying on unconventional strategies. Despite the initial underestimation of his abilities, he counters her every move, using clever maneuvers and out-of-the-box thinking to hold his ground. Cliffhanger: as the final round begins. Lyra becomes visibly frustrated, realizing Marcus has anticipated her every move. She pushes harder, her frustration causing her to underestimate the human commander's resolve. Part 3. The Unexpected. Turn summary. Lyra's aggressive approach causes her to make a fatal mistake. She launches a surprise attack on Marcus's forces, but Marcus has already foreseen it and sets a trap. In a brilliant and seemingly impossible play, Marcus turns the tide of the simulation, achieving a resounding victory. The entire room falls silent. Lyra is speechless, stunned by the human's success. She confronts him, disbelief in her voice. How did you do it?" she asks. The other members of the Galactic Council, watching in silence, begin to whisper among themselves. Cliffhanger. Instead of bragging or rubbing in his victory, Marcus simply states, "I was trained by the best." This cryptic statement causes everyone to question his background. What does he mean by that? Lyra, now intrigued, realizes that there is far more to this Earthborn than she had ever imagined. Part 4. The Revelation Summary. Lyra, unable to shake the thought of Marcus's performance, begins to dig into his past. She learns that Marcus Vale is no ordinary human. He is a high-ranking officer in the United Earth Federation, one of the most elite military organizations in the galaxy. Not only that, but Marcus is also a decorated war hero who played a crucial role in winning a pivotal battle during the Human-Draken War, a conflict that almost destroyed the Federation. His tactics were revolutionary, His leadership has been studied by countless military academies across the galaxy. As Lyra processes this information, she is struck by the magnitude of her earlier mockery. The reality is clear. This Earthborn human is a force to be reckoned with. Cliffhanger. Lyra, now humbled, approaches Marcus, seeking answers. What is it about humans? Why are you so different? Marcus looks at her with calm eyes, responding with a quiet smile. You haven't even scratched the surface. Part 5. The Human Advantage Summary. Lyra's curiosity about humanity grows as she continues to interact with Marcus. She asks him about the secret to his people's resilience, intelligence, and ingenuity. In their private conversations, Marcus explains that the true strength of humanity is not found in their technology or their size, but in their unwavering adaptability and determination to survive against all odds. He speaks of Earth's violent history, filled with wars and natural disasters, and how humans have always found a way to persevere. Lyra begins to see humanity in a new light, realizing that the Earthborn might be small in comparison to the ancient, powerful species of the galaxy, but their resourcefulness and spirit are unparalleled. She starts to respect Marcus, not just as a commander, but as an embodiment of the strength that humans possess. Final twist in the final moments of the story. An urgent galactic crisis unfolds and the Vrel forces, who have been slowly turning the galaxy toward war, make their move. The council is in disarray, but Marcus steps forward, his experience and leadership becoming the key to uniting the galaxy's fractured forces. With Lyra by his side, they lead a new coalition of species in a battle that will determine the future of the galaxy. This outline introduces a strong Earthborn protagonist, with a clever blend of personal growth and tension, while also building up Lyra's transformation from mockery to admiration. The final twist leaves the door open for future stories, showing how humanity's greatest strength might just be their very survival instinct. Let me know if you want to expand or modify any part of the story. You said Part 1, 1,300 words? Kaleko, or interesting Huna, Chea, or third-person style, Malek Naha, or simple basic English Ka. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content, ChatGPT said. Below is Part 1 rewritten in simple English. Third-person style, interesting, non-violent, in close to 1,300 words. I have kept the language clean exactly as you asked. No violated or harmful content. Asterisk asterisk EP3, she mocked the Earthborn. Human, Part 1. The Conqueror's mockery, asterisk asterisk, around 1,300 words, simple English. Third-person style, the Grand Hall of the Galactic Assembly shone like a giant crystal floating in the heart of space. Its walls were made of living light, and its floor shimmered with soft colors that changed with every step. Delegates from across the galaxy walked through the hall in proud line-stall beings with glowing eyes, short beings with shimmering scales, and others whose shapes did not always look solid. It was a place where powerful voices met. It's a place where the future of star systems was often decided. Among these many species, humans were a minority. Few people outside Earth took them seriously. Some saw humans as too young, too inexperienced, too emotional, or simply too new to the galactic stage. Many had never even visited Earth. They already judged it as a small planet with small people. Lyra, a proud officer from the Vrel Dominion, held all these opinions strongly. She was known for her confidence and ambition. The Vrel were a respected species, famous for discipline, strategy, and precision. Their long history of leadership made them believe they understood the galaxy better than most others. Lyra believed this even more than the rest of her kind. Standing tall with her silver blue skin and bright amber eyes, she looked around the grand hall with an expression of calm control. She thought she understood everyone here's their strengths, their weaknesses, their value. And to her, one species held the least value of all. Humans. She had barely interacted with humans before, but she had heard many stories. Earthborn, some aliens would say, with a joking tone. They try so hard. It is almost adorable. Others called them late arrivals, small thinkers, or lucky survivors of a wild planet. Lyra accepted these stories without question. So, when she first saw the Earthborn officer standing near one of the glowing tables in the hall, her curiosity was mild, but her judgment was immediate. His name was Marcus Vale, though she did not know it yet. He stood quietly, dressed in a simple but neat uniform of the United Earth Federation. His posture was calm, his hands behind his back, and his dark eyes observing everything around him with quiet interest. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't seem out of place. He simply was there, taking in the room with steady attention to Lyra. This calm expression looked like overconfidence. She walked past him with her head held high, her long steps slow and controlled, the way all Varel were trained to walk. She did not intend to speak to him. She simply intended to pass by and move toward the lounge area, where several high-ranking delegates were discussing upcoming schedules. But the Earthborn human looked up at the same moment she walked past. Their eyes met briefly, and Marcus gave her a polite nod, small, respectful gesture. To Lyra, the nod felt almost amusing. A human showing her respect. Or worse did he think. The following day, the Galactic Assembly convened once again in the Grand Hall, where delegates from hundreds of star systems came together to discuss the future of the galaxy. But for Lyra, today felt different. It was the day after the simulation challenge with the human officer. Marcus Vale. The memory of his unexpected success still lingered in her thoughts. She hadn't quite been able to shake the surprise she felt when his simple adjustment to their plan led them to a near-perfect result. Her mind kept returning to that small change he had made, the one she had missed completely. At first it had seemed so insignificant, but now that she thought about it, Marcus's move had proven to be brilliant. She couldn't understand why a human would think like that. They had always been seen as a species with little to offer, too young, too emotional, too unpredictable. But Marcus had shown something different, a calm, analytical mind, and an ability to see patterns others missed. But she quickly brushed the thought aside. No, he's just a fluke, a lucky guess. Lyra stood tall, her silver-blue skin gleaming under the bright lights of the assembly hall. Today was another day of meetings, of strategies, of making decisions that would shape the future of the galaxy. It was not a place for distractions, and certainly not a place for a human officer. Yet, despite her best efforts to push the thoughts away, they kept returning. The human's quiet confidence, the way he stood there without showing arrogance, but also without showing fear, something about that made Lyra uneasy. "Focus, Lyra," she muttered to herself. "You're here for business." The hall was buzzing with conversations as delegates took their seats. Lyra made her way to the large circular table at the center of the hall, where the most important discussions would take place. As she sat, her eyes scanned the room, looking for familiar faces and important figures from the different star systems. And there he was. Marcus Vale. He was standing near the side of the room, engaged in quiet conversation with a few delegates from the Andorian Alliance. Unlike the rest of the officers, he didn't seem to be trying to stand out or gather attention. He didn't have the arrogance or the flair that Lyra had seen in many of the other military officers. Instead, he appeared comfortable. This irritated her more than she cared to admit. What is it about him? Why does he make me feel like I'm the one who's out of place? Just then, the meeting began, and the lights dimmed. The holographic displays above the table activated, showing a series of star systems and tactical maps. The conversation shifted to the current situation with the Vrale Dominion and its relations with the Draken Empire, a neighboring star system that had been slowly drifting toward conflict. Lyra's sharp eyes immediately focused on the screen. She was no stranger to galactic politics, and the Draken Empire had been a delicate issue for some time. It was a matter of resources, power, and influence, and Lyra was always ready to jump into discussions about tactics and strategy. But as the meeting continued, something unexpected happened. Marcus Vale, who had stayed quiet up until that moment, spoke up. His voice was steady and clear, his words sharp and to the point. It seems that both the Vrale and the Draken are focused on the same resources in the northern quadrant. Marcus said. But if we look closely, we'll see that the real prize isn't in the northern quadrant at all. A quiet murmur spread across the table as everyone turned to listen. Lyra couldn't help but notice the calm, confident way he spoke. It wasn't the kind of reaction she expected from an Earthborn officer. Why is he speaking now? Lyra thought. Does he even understand the depth of this situation? Marcus continued, his eyes scanning the room as if he were calculating every possibility. The real prize is in the uncharted zone, he said. There's an area beyond the northern quadrant, far enough from the core that neither side is looking there. But if we secure it, we can control the flow of resources for both the Vrail and the Drakon. They'll both be forced to negotiate with us for access. Lyra's eyes narrowed. His suggestion was bold. Too bold. The uncharted zone was considered dangerous an area with unstable planets, constant ion storms, and unknown threats. No one had dared to venture there for centuries, but Marcus didn't seem intimidated by the danger. The risks are high, he acknowledged. But the rewards are greater. If we can control that zone, we'll force both the Vrail and the Drakon to the table. We can broker a peace, or we can take advantage of the situation. Either way, we win. Lyra stared at him, her mind racing. His plan was reckless, but it was a lesser brilliant. It wasn't the typical approach she would have taken. But there was a certain elegance in the way Marcus had mapped it out. It was simple, yet effective. He wasn't concerned with the current conflict. He was thinking of the bigger picture. He wasn't just playing checkers. He was playing chess. The room was silent as the delegates processed his words. Then, one by one, they began to discuss the possibilities, offering their own ideas. But Lyra could barely focus. She was too caught up in Marcus's plan. How did he see that? She wondered. How could he look at a map at the stars and see something that no one else had noticed? Her mind flashed back to the simulation from the day before, the way Marcus had adjusted their plan with that small change. Is this his way of thinking? Lyra thought. Always looking for the smallest detail, the one that everyone else misses? She was starting to see something she hadn't considered before. Marcus Vale was not just a human officer. He was something more. His mind worked differently from the others in the room. He didn't think like a Vrail. He didn't think like an Andorian. He thought like a human. And for the first time, Lyra found herself questioning everything she had ever believed about humanity. Was she wrong about them? After the meeting ended, Lyra found herself walking alongside Marcus as they left the assembly hall. She was trying to keep her composure, but her mind was racing. She needed to understand him, needed to figure out what made him so different. You've certainly stirred up some reactions today, Lyra said. Her voice calm, but there was a hint of curiosity beneath it. Marcus looked at her, his expression unreadable. I'm not here to stir reactions. I'm here to make things better. Lyra paused, slightly taken aback. It wasn't a boast. It wasn't arrogance. He was simply stating a fact, as if it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. She was about to say something else, when Marcus suddenly turned to her with a quiet smile. You know, we're not so different, you and I, he said. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? Both of us come from places where survival is key. Both of us have had to learn how to adapt and make do with what we have. You rely on tactics. I rely on other things. Lyra didn't know what to say. She had never considered that humans and Vrail might share any similarities at all. Yet for some reason, his words felt true. Perhaps, Lyra said, her tone softening slightly. Perhaps you're right. As they walked down the long corridor, Marcus paused. Tomorrow, there's another strategy session. I'd like you to join me. If you want, of course. Lyra stopped in her tracks. She hadn't expected him to invite her. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because, Marcus said with a small smile, I think you might learn something. About me and about yourself. Lyra hesitated. Was he challenging her? Or was he offering her a chance to see the world through human eyes? This is going to be interesting, she thought. Maybe, just maybe, I've misjudged them. The following morning, Lyra found herself walking through the long, gleaming halls of the Galactic Assembly once again. This time, however, her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts kept returning to Marcus Velva, Earthborn human, who had somehow managed to impress her. It was strange to think about, especially considering how much she had mocked him the day before. Why did I underestimate him? She wondered. What is it about him that keeps pulling me back to his ideas? Her silver-blue skin shimmered in the dim light of the hallway, and her amber eyes narrowed as she thought about the conversation they had had after the meeting yesterday. Marcus had invited her to another strategy session, and despite herself, Lyra was intrigued. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to him than just a human officer. As she entered the strategy room, she was greeted by the familiar faces of her fellow delegates, each one engaged in conversation or studying the holographic maps that hovered over the central table. Lyra scanned the room quickly, her sharp gaze immediately falling on Marcus, who was already standing by the map, studying it with a quiet intensity. So he's serious about this, she thought. Maybe this won't be as simple as I thought. The moment Lyra entered, Marcus turned to her and offered a small, calm smile. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice steady. He didn't seem surprised by her arrival, as if he had expected her to come. Lyra nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I'm here," she said simply. "Let's see what you've got." Marcus gestured to the map, where a new situation had been projected. It showed a new conflict between the Vrail and the Draken Empire, but this time the scenario was far more complicated. The two factions were vying for control of a key space station located at the edge of the Galaxia station that controlled a critical trade route. The resources at stake were valuable, and the tensions were high. "Today's challenge is different," Marcus said. "We're not just looking for a simple solution. We need to think about the bigger picture. If we don't find a way to create peace, we might end up with a full-scale war." Lyra looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "You think peace is possible here? Between the Vrail and the Draken?" Marcus met her gaze, his expression calm. "I think it's worth trying." For a moment, Lyra studied him carefully. There was something about his confidence that unsettled her, but she wasn't sure why. She wasn't used to dealing with people who spoke with such quiet certainty. It was the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance, but from a deep belief in one's own judgment. She couldn't deny that she was curious to see how he would handle this new scenario. "Well then," Lyra said, taking her seat at the table, "let's begin." The simulation started, and the two factions, Vrail and Draken, were quickly set in motion. Both sides had powerful fleets, advanced technology, and well-trained soldiers. The space station was heavily guarded, but it was clear that neither side would back down easily as the simulation unfolded. Lyra was quick to take charge, mapping out a direct route to capture the station. She was accustomed to these kinds of strategies. Quick, decisive moves that would take out the enemy's forces with minimal losses. But as she looked over at Marcus, she noticed that he wasn't following the same approach. Instead of rushing into battle, he was considering multiple paths, ones that avoided direct conflict. He seemed more focused on negotiating than on fighting. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice filled with a hint of disbelief. Marcus didn't look up from the map. "I'm thinking about how we can create an opening for peace," he said quietly. "If we just fight, we'll lose more than we gain. But if we can offer the Vrail and the Draken a chance to talk, we might find a way to end this conflict without anyone firing a single shot." Lyra's lips tightened as she watched him work. He wasn't taking the easy way out. He wasn't just using force. Instead, he was trying to find a way to use diplomacy, something that she had never considered in this kind of simulation. In her experience, battles were won with strategy and force. Peace was a luxury, something that could only come after victory. Yet Marcus didn't seem to agree. His calm demeanor never wavered as he adjusted his plan. Slowly, he made small changes, redirecting fleet paths, altering communication channels, and opening avenues for possible talks between the two sides. Lyra, for the first time in the simulation, hesitated. She hadn't expected this. Could peace really work here? But as the simulation continued, it became clear that Marcus's plan wasn't just theory, it was working. The fleets of both the Vrail and the Draken began to move cautiously, taking defensive positions rather than attacking. The tension in the simulation room grew as the two sides began communicating. "Look at this," Lyra said under her breath, her eyes wide with surprise. "He's actually doing it." Marcus glanced over at her and smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best move is the one that doesn't involve a weapon." Lyra couldn't argue with that. She watched as the Vrail and Dracon leaders in the simulation began talking, negotiating, and eventually agreeing to a temporary ceasefire. It was a fragile peace, but it was a peace nonetheless. The two factions pulled back, their forces no longer on the edge of war. When the simulation ended, the room was silent for a moment. Lyra sat back in her chair, staring at the glowing map, trying to process what had just happened. Her usual approach would have led to a violent confrontation, but Marcus had found another way. A way that avoided unnecessary bloodshed. A way that worked. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Marcus leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied but not overly proud. "I just saw an opportunity," he said. "Sometimes it's about more than just winning. It's about finding a way to stop everyone from losing." Lyra's mind raced. The solution was so simple, yet so effective. Why had she never thought of this before? She had always been trained to think in terms of battle and conquest, not negotiation and compromise, as the other delegates began to speak among themselves. Discussing the results of the simulation, Lyra found herself alone in her thoughts. She had been so sure of her own strength, of the Vrail way of thinking, but Marcus had shown her something else. Is this what humans are capable of? She wondered. Is this how they think? Her eyes flicked back to Marcus, who was now listening to a discussion with other officers. He looked calm, composed, but there was something about him that made her rethink everything she had ever believed about humanity. He wasn't just another soldier. He wasn't just another officer. He was something else, someone who had found a way to bridge the gap between two powerful species with nothing but words and strategy. Lyra's chest tightened as she realized something she hadn't considered before. Maybe humans aren't just lucky survivors. Maybe there's something more. And then something inside her clicked. I need to understand them. I need to understand him. As the meeting broke up, Lyra walked toward Marcus, her steps measured but purposeful. He looked up when he saw her approach. "Well," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of curiosity. "I have to admit, you were right. You really did create a peace." Marcus smiled slightly, as if he had known she would come around. "It wasn't just me. It was us." Lyra didn't argue. "I'd like to see more of your approach," she said. I think I need to learn from you." Marcus's smile deepened, but he didn't say anything more. Instead, he simply nodded, as if he had expected this all along. And for the first time, Lyra realized that perhaps the Earthborn had something more to teach her than she had ever imagined. The days after the strategy session were a blur for Lyra. She found herself thinking about Marcus's veil more and more. He had shown her something new, something she had never considered before. His approach to diplomacy, his quiet confidence, and his ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles were all qualities that fascinated her. For the first time in her career, Lyra questioned the limits of her own training. The Vrail were known for their precision, their tactics, their ability to win battles. She had always believed that strength and strategy were the key to everything. But Marcus had proven her wrong. He showed her that sometimes the real power lay not in force, but in understanding. As Lyra sat in her quarters, reviewing reports on the current status of the Varaldacon situation, her mind kept wandering back to him. How does he do it? She wondered, what makes him think so differently? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her comms panel. It was a message from the Galactic Assembly. "Lyra, please join the high-level briefing in the strategy room. Your presence is requested," the voice of the assistant said. Lyra sighed, the weight of her responsibilities weighing heavily on her. Another meeting, another round of tactics and debates. But she didn't mind. In fact, she had grown accustomed to the endless discussions and complicated negotiations. It was part of her role. But as she made her way to the strategy room, she realized that today felt different. Something in the air seemed ... charged. There was an energy in the hallways, a quiet hum of activity as if everyone was anticipating something. When she entered the strategy room, the usual crowd of officers and delegates was present, but Marcus Vale was not among them. Lyra frowned. He had been a constant presence lately, attending meetings and offering insights. It seemed strange that he wasn't there today. A few moments passed, and the door slid open. In walked Marcus, but he wasn't alone. To Lyra's surprise, he was accompanied by a tall figure, cloaked in a dark, flowing robe. The figure's face was obscured, but Lyra immediately recognized the outline of the individual's body, tall and broad-shouldered. With a presence that seemed almost otherworldly, the room fell silent as the figure stepped forward, their robes swirling around them like a shadow. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the figure's aura was unsettling. It wasn't just the stranger's size or the way they moved, it was the way everyone in the room reacted to them. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the most seasoned officers seemed to hold their breath in the presence of the cloaked figure. Marcus, ever calm, spoke first. "This is Jorik of the Eldrin people," he said, his voice steady, but filled with a hint of something Lyra couldn't place. "I have asked for a private meeting with the Assembly to discuss a matter of great importance." Lyra's eyes narrowed. The Eldrin were an ancient species, powerful and mysterious, with a long history of keeping to themselves. They were known for their wisdom, but also their secrecy. Few people outside their race knew much about them. The room remained still, all eyes on the Eldron figure. Jorik's movements were slow and deliberate as they took a seat at the head of the table. Marcus, who had been standing nearby, finally moved to sit as well, his expression unreadable. "Tell us why you are here, Jorik," one of the delegates said, his voice filled with skepticism. Jorik lifted their hood, revealing a face that was both alien and ancient. Their eyes, black as the void, seemed to hold the weight of countless years. "We are here because the galaxy stands on the edge of a precipice," Jorik said, their voice a deep, resonant tone that sent ripples of unease through the room. "There is a force beyond the stars that threatens all of us. A force that has already begun to move." Lyra felt a pang of confusion. What was Jorik talking about? What was this force they were referring to? "The Earthborn are the key," Jorik continued, their voice softer now, but no less intense. "Humanity has been underestimated for far too long. It is no longer just about war or peace or trade. This force, this unknown threat, can only be stopped if we understand the true strength of humanity." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors, stories whispered in dark corners of the Assembly, that something was stirring in the farthest reaches of space. A threat unlike any they had seen before, but she had always dismissed it as exaggerated tales. The galaxy had faced threats before, but they had always been overcome. Now, sitting across from the Eldrin, Lyra realized that the threat was real. "The Earthborn are not merely survivors of a dangerous planet," Jorik said, their eyes locking onto Lyra's. "They are more. Their potential is unlike any other species in the galaxy. It is why Marcus Vale is here, and why you need to understand what he represents." "What?" I'll send Red up. Her thoughts were racing. She had always seen humanity as a young and inexperienced species, but now she wasn't so sure. Could it be that Marcus, this quiet, unassuming officer, held the key to the future of the galaxy? She glanced at him, trying to read his expression. But Marcus remained calm, his face as unreadable as ever. "You speak of humanity's potential," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. "But what exactly are you suggesting? That the Earthborn are somehow ... special? More than just soldiers? Jork nodded slowly. Yes, they are. Their adaptability, their resilience, their ability to overcome impossible odds, they possess something the other species do not. And it is why they are the only ones who can face this unknown force. Lyra's mind was swirling. Could it really be true? Could humans have something the galaxy had never seen before? She had mocked Marcus for his calm demeanor, but now she was beginning to see the wisdom in his actions. The Eldrin didn't speak lightly. They were a species of immense knowledge and power. If humanity is so crucial, Lyra asked, why has no one noticed before now? Jork's gaze softened, almost sadly, because the galaxy has always focused on what it can see. The Earthborn do not draw attention to themselves, but that is what makes them so dangerous to our enemies. They are unpredictable, and that is why they are the key. Lyra's thoughts were scattered. She had spent so long dismissing humanity, thinking they were beneath her, beneath the galactic powers. Now, she realized how wrong she had been. Marcus was more than just a military officer. He was a symbol of humanity's strength, of their untapped potential. She turned to Marcus, finally speaking to him directly. You knew this all along, didn't you? She asked, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and frustration. You knew what your people were capable of. Marcus met her gaze, his expression calm as always. I've always known, he said quietly. And I think for the first time you're starting to understand. Lyra's chest tightened. She had been wrong. But now, it was time to move forward. The galaxy was on the brink of something terrible, and if Marcus and humanity were the key to stopping it, she would have to learn from them. She looked at the Eldrin, then back at Marcus. Tell me what we need to do, Marcus smiled. But it wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a smile of quiet confidence, as if he had known this moment was coming all along. The first step, he said softly, is understanding that we are stronger together than apart. Lyra nodded, finally understanding. For the first time, she saw humanity not as a lesser species, but as a force to be reckoned with. A force that could change the fate of the galaxy. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were the ones who would lead the way. The days following the revelation about humanity's potential seemed to pass in a blur for Lyra. The galaxy was no longer the same place. It had been just weeks ago. Everything was shifting, and the more Lyra learned about the Earthborn, the more she realized how much she had underestimated them. She had always believed that strength was about power, about the ability to crush your enemies with superior tactics and technology. But Marcus Vale, along with the others from Earth, had shown her that true strength wasn't always about brute force. It was about adaptability. It was about surviving, learning, and finding new ways to overcome the impossible. Marcus had become something of an enigma to Lyra. She no longer saw him as just another human officer. He was a symbol of humanity's unexpected strength, their unyielding determination to survive and thrive. Every time they spoke, every time they worked together, Lyra found herself learning something new, something she hadn't expected, something that made her question everything she thought she knew. Today, as Lyra walked into the Galactic Assembly Hall for another important meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change again. The atmosphere in the hall was tense. Delegates from all over the galaxy were gathered, discussing the growing unrest in the galaxy. The threat that Jork, the Eldrin, had warned them about was beginning to take shape. The unknown force, moving quietly through the far reaches of space, was approaching, and it seemed that no one was prepared for what it might bring. Lyra stood at the back of the room, listening intently as the council members debated their next move. The conversation was filled with uncertainty, and it seemed that no one could agree on how to deal with the impending threat. Some believed they should focus on strengthening their military forces. Others suggested diplomacy. The disagreements were becoming louder, more intense. Then Marcus's Vale spoke up. As we all know, Marcus began, his voice calm and steady. The enemy we face is unlike any we've encountered before. It doesn't move like any force we've seen. It doesn't rely on brute strength or weapons. It moves in the shadows. It manipulates. It adapts. To defeat it, we need to think differently. Lyra, who had been standing at the edge of the room, watched as Marcus addressed the council. His presence, though unassuming, commanded attention. It wasn't just the way he spoke, it was the way he listened. It's the way he seemed to understand everything happening around him. For the first time, Lyra truly saw the depth of humanity's strength. She had always believed that strategy and power were the key to victory, but Marcus had shown her that true power came from something else, something less visible, something that couldn't be measured by military strength alone. We cannot face this enemy by doing what we've always done, Marcus continued, his voice carrying through the room. We need to be flexible. We need to adapt just as they do. We need to be unpredictable. The room was silent for a moment. No one spoke. The idea of adapting to the unknown threat was a new concept for many of the delegates. They were used to relying on their advanced technology, their superior forces. The idea that the key to winning might lie in something as intangible as adaptability was difficult to accept. But Marcus wasn't finished. Humanity is not a species known for its size or its power, he said, his eyes scanning the room. But we are a species known for our ability to survive. We've been through wars, natural disasters, and even extinction-level events. We've learned how to adapt, how to think outside the box, how to survive against all odds. And that's why we are the key to stopping this force. We don't fight like others fight. We think differently. Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had always seen humans as small and weak, too young and too inexperienced to make a real difference in the galaxy. But now, standing in front of the council with Marcus, she realized how wrong she had been. Humanity was different. They didn't rely on sheer strength. They relied on something far more powerful there, the ability to adapt and evolve. The room remained silent for a long moment as everyone processed Marcus's words. Finally, one of the delegates from the Andorian Alliance spoke up. Are you suggesting that we rely on human tactics to fight this enemy? The Andorian asked, his voice skeptical. Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes, he said simply. I'm suggesting that we take a different approach. We need to understand our enemy and learn to think like them. We need to be unpredictable. We need to surprise them. Lyra could see the resistance in the room. Many of the delegates were uncomfortable with the idea of relying on humanity for the solution to this galaxy-wide crisis. But she could also see the seeds of doubt being planted in their minds. Slowly, they were beginning to see the truth in Marcus's words. For Lyra, it was a revelation. She had spent her entire life believing in the superiority of her own species, the Vrail. But now, she was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military power. It was their ability to adapt, to survive, to think outside the box. As the meeting continued, Lyra found herself reflecting on everything Marcus had taught her. She had once mocked him for being an Earthborn, for being so different from the rest of the galaxy's powerful species. But now, she saw him for what he truly was, a visionary. Someone who saw beyond the surface and understood what was needed to win this war. When the meeting finally broke up, Lyra made her way to Marcus. He was standing by the side of the room, talking quietly with a few delegates from the Celestian Order. As she approached, Marcus looked up and smiled, his usual calm demeanor unchanged. You were right, Lyra said, her voice quieter than usual. You were right about everything. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting her admission. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I've spent my whole life believing that strength comes from power, from tactics, from technology. But you've shown me that strength comes from something else. Something more than just what's on the surface. Marcus's smile widened slightly. I'm glad you're starting to see it. Lyra took a deep breath. I was wrong about humanity, she admitted. I've spent so long underestimating your species. But now, I see that you have something we don't. Something that could change the galaxy. Marcus looked at her for a moment, his gaze steady. Humanity doesn't have all the answers, he said. But we have one thing that's always kept us going. Our ability to adapt, to learn, and to find new ways to survive. Lyra nodded slowly. I think that might be the most important lesson I've ever learned. As they stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the assembly hall, Lyra realized that everything she had believed about the galaxy, about power and about strength, had changed. Humanity wasn't just a species to be dismissed, they were a force to be reckoned with. And, in the face of the unknown threat that loomed over them all, Lyra finally understood the one thing that had always set humans apart: their ability to find a way when no one else could. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice filled with newfound respect. Marcus smiled again, the calm determination in his eyes never wavering. "We're ready." And with that, Lyra knew that the galaxy had a real chance at surviving the coming storm. Thanks to the humans, and thanks to Marcus, they would face the future not with fear, but with the courage to adapt and fight in ways they had never imagined.